All right, everyone. Hey, welcome back to Premier Study and Investing. We're looking at Quidel Corp. They are a company that basically does diagnostic testing, and we've covered them before. We've compared them to Becton Dickinson, to Abbott, some of their major competitors. And, well, they had a really, really great third quarter announcement, and they have some pretty great looking fourth quarter expectations. This has an estimated third quarter revenues was 476. We know that they're estimating between 8 and 900 million fourth quarter. So that's going to be a huge increase. I'm going to go over the investors call with you, Q3 earnings call, and I wanted to show you a couple things just before we jump over there. Had Charles here. He sold at 282 recently, a couple days ago in November. We had Ratan sell at $1 or $189. That's back in September of this year. We have Mary. She got out of some shares at $275 and also picked up a bunch of shares between $15 and $24. Isn't that a sweet deal? So over the weekend, we had some crazy stuff happen. We had a new president-elect, and we're going to see how that all plays out as far as if there's any mistakes in the voting. Obviously, it's contested at this point. We also had Pfizer come out and say that they had a vaccine that was 90% effective, and some people have said, yeah, but only like 94 people tested on that. So that's what I heard. Anyways, crazy day in the markets today. I just wanted to show you some of the other analysts' view of Quidel. And there was a huge sell-off today. It was down 28%, so it fell over $80 today. I bought, but here's some of the reasons why. And I don't think that I've been as excited about a company after looking at this in the short term in a while. So basically, third quarter highlights were that total revenue increased by 276% to 476.1 million from 126 million in the third quarter of a year ago. Total sales of COVID-19 products were about 375 million, which is a lot. That's what, like 75%, maybe 70% of the 476. Reported GAAP EPS of $5.33 for the diluted share in the third quarter of 2020 compares to a year earlier where the EPS was 38 cents. Reported non-GAAP, and so non-GAAP would be like if there's some extraordinary events that took place. I'm not going to go through all these numbers because they're pretty boring. I'm just going to jump over. I'll leave this on the screen if you want to read it or reference it. But basically, the third quarter earnings call started with Doug Bryant, the CEO. He said that this was his 42nd consecutive quarter call, so he's been doing this for 10.5 years. Also had Randy Stewart on the line, which is the company's CFO. Doug basically started the call and said, look, we're coming in flu season, and we just had a record quarter. The company's never done so well as it did in Q3. So, obviously, if you have total revenue increasing by 276%, it's pretty great. He said, they solved the problem along the way, and they ended up doing 2.1 kits a week. They think that's going to be sustainable in Q4. They said it was a little bit slow on the flu testing that they put out, and also they shipped some ABC tests as well. They call those the flu A, flu B, so the A strain, the B strain, and the coronavirus. So that's their ABC. It's a combination test. And what they basically decided to do was that by December, they expect that about 80% of the tests they're going to be rolling out are going to be these ABC tests, and about 20% they'll do SARS tests. What they're basically running into is they're running into some constraints on the manufacturing side of things. They said that they did place 500 of the Sofia 2 machines. Those are the point-of-care machines in the third quarter. And I think they have... It says they will have increased demand, but they will not be able to catch up with demand until the first quarter of 2021 for their instruments. So they have a lot of people wanting them, which is great, and so they just got to do the best they can, Molecular and supply side of their organization is based out of Athens, Ohio. They said that they could meet demand for the Lyra, which runs the SARS, that it's improving, and in the fourth quarter, they're going to expect to see the demand for the Lyra or the revenues from that demand improve by 33%. They're waiting on EUA approval for the Solano, which is another SARS instrument. COVID instrument, and he just said that that would be quote unquote meaningful revenue from that. They have on November 12th a big investor day. They're going to spend about half the day talking to everyone about all the ins and outs. They have some new things like something called sniffles. They have these different new machines they're rolling out. What they basically said, their CFO got on and he said that the gross profit margin was 81%. And I mean, their revenues, gross profit went from, it was up 307 million to 383 million. So, I mean, that means they only had like 70, 75 million or so before. I think they were compared to last year. But I mean, it's just like an incredible amount of growth. So, adding 307 to get to 383. They said they're benefiting from economies of scale as they're able to distribute their fixed cost over larger numbers of units going out. They said they had an operating margin of about 65%. They expect to pay off all their debt by the end of Q4. They have very, very little debt, and so I think they're going to pay off. They'll have about another $4 million to pay off in Q4 to totally be out of the woods. Well, then they went to the Q&A. There's a question that came in about the guidance for Q4, and they said that revenues will be at least $800 million anticipated, and their total of all their products going out the door will be about 2.1 million tests per week. Next question was, will demand and pricing be constant in 2021? And the answer was they didn't really know. I mean, it does kind of depend upon immunity, herd immunity, or how easy it is for people to contract the disease a second, third time. He said that the government is asking them to ramp up production well beyond 2021. So he even mentioned like 2022, 2023. So the government wants them to really kick it into high gear. Now, there were some really other interesting questions that came in about asymptomatic testing being kind of the new normal. Is that what we're going to do? Even if this, say, vaccine from Pfizer is all that we would hope it would be. There's questions about, well, how long does it last? Are we going to continue to test people because it's not 100% effective, it's 90% effective is what we found out. And other things like this, So they're really talking like, look, they already have contracts with some leagues, some college athletic programs, and they want to test their athletes every day. And it makes sense. You want to protect those student athletes. So they really said that they thought asymptomatic testing would kind of become like a new normal, that's kind of what people would do, companies would do, universities would do. And yeah, so what else? The next question came in, will there be a run rate or like a market size on asymptomatic testing? And the answer that came back from the CEO was basically like, look, we don't sit around calculating that. It's a tough number to come up with. He says, but what I can tell you is that, we get requests, and if we added up all the requests that we got for our tests, it'd be somewhere in the ballpark of 685 million tests per year. Just a lot. I mean, it sounded like a lot to me. Sorry, I should start on the other side of this page. Going back to just their presentation they made before the Q&A, they said that in the fourth quarter they're going to launch expected Sofia Serology assay, which is like a whole blood test. They're going to be looking for the IgG antibodies when they're doing their COVID test, and like pretty much all of their big bump in sales all had to do with COVID. So they said that this Sofia Serology assay was going to be a point-of-care test. They'd use the finger stick, and it would give results in just minutes. I don't know, what is that, 25 minutes? I don't know. He didn't tell us. Also, they're going to launch something called like the Quick-O-Sars. They kept speaking not super clearly, so it's like called something like the Quick-O-Sars test, and the results, the performance of that has been similar to PCR tests. PCR tests are usually considered to be very accurate, and so they're excited about this. They're looking to do 50 million Quick-O-Sars per month, and they should be able to achieve that by 2021. On their molecular products, they said they're manufacturing 1 million Solano SARS instruments a month. And no, that would be tests a month, I'm sorry. And then the Solano SARS instrument can do about 12 tests at once. It can do 12 tests at once, and it'll give the results in about 25 minutes. As far as their core business, he said that they'll really touch on that during their investor day on November 12th, but they're going to basically highlight the long-term plan that they were thinking of as a company prior to COVID, how they could have a sustained 12% compounded annual growth rate for the next 6 years. So they're going to talk something about the Savannah program, which is going to be their next flagship product. Someone else is going to come on and talk about Triage True, and then a vision for at-home testing, which they think is really going to be something big, something that we haven't seen before, something that, you know, people will think is like unquestioned almost at some point in the future. And so the tide is changing. He said something like along those lines. The CFO said that they basically had capacity limitations, and so they chose to supply COVID products rather than RSV, strep, or flu tests. And they kind of had to just make a decision on where to go, so that's how they decided. There's another question that came in and said that, you know, like how much will Medicare pay for these lab tests? There may be something. The answer was that in some cases will be a decrease from $100 down to $75. But really that the pricing for the ABC, remember this is the flu and COVID combo test, they said they charge about $23 a test, and so that's not going to impact them. The CEO was not worried about pricing pressure, and then they said that another question came in about retail-oriented partnerships, like, hey, why don't you guys, you know, try to get these machines into Walgreens and CVS? And the CEO said, hey, that's a great comment, great question. It's a very logical place for this Sofia 2. But really, they kind of made like ethical or moral or strategic decision. They said they wanted to really focus on hospitals, on urgent care, and on labs. That's where they wanted to like put the main emphasis in order to help the country or help the people. And that's really what they set out to do from the beginning. The plan is they have some manufacturing coming out of Australia and also out of Ohio, and that they should be able to produce another 10,000 machines a month. They're getting there. They're almost there. They think they're going to be there in a few months. And at that point, then they would be able to go and talk to some of these retailers, and there's been many, many retailers that the CEO said had reached out to them already and contacted them. So there's the demand there, which I thought was super exciting. I think people really overreacted with the big sell-off. I mean, I really, really do. I think that there's going to still be testing done, even if this Pfizer vaccine is everything that we could hope for and more. I think we're still going to test. Anyway, the next question came in and it said, what about Quidel's home testing strategy and the Quick-O-Sars? EUA is, they're waiting approval for that. They said they want to really get up to a point. They want to grow as a company with the manufacturing and the scale in order to really be able to really go after like a home-based, consumer-based, product for all the households in America or wherever they sell. They're working all over the world. I shouldn't just say America at all. But he says, we want to get up to 500 million tests per year. And he says right away, we could get to 100 million fairly easily, but then we got 80% of the way to go after that. So we got some growing to do. On the last page of my notes, he basically said, look, he reiterated, we have the Sofia flu, we have Sofia combo test, the ABC test, they have Sofia SARS, they have the Solano test, and a Quick-O-Sars test. But they said, however you break it down, however we split it up, he says, in total, we're going to put out 2.1 million tests a week. And he said basically we're going to expect to get about 80 million expected revenue from the Sofia, about 65 million expected from cardiovascular. That the Quick-O-Sars launch is meaningful. It should drive meaningful revenue. It is under FDA approval. Solano SARS as well, but he didn't put a number on either of those two. But what he did say is, look, we're expecting total revenue in the fourth quarter to be 800 to 900 million. Which we just did, 476. That's going to be another huge quarter if they can pull it off. And there's a question about, when are we going to hear about the update on the Savannah, which is, this flagship product. And what he basically said was what they'll say. They'll talk more at the Investor Day on November, whatever I just said before, that they're going to place 73 units in the marketplace. They're going to run trials. But the early results look really, really good as far as its performance. And then the last thing was there was a comment about how they had given kind of generous terms to some of their distributors, and so they had a lot of accounts receivables. Was an account that had really ballooned, and so they were waiting to get paid from a lot of people. So the comment was, are you guys going to, continue to let that thing stay at that heightened level? Are you going to try to turn any of those accounts receivables into cash? What's the plan? Are you going to continue to be nice to basically people that buy from you? And they said no. Basically, it was just a short-term deal. We wanted to be, gracious and help them out, but ultimately that's not something we're going to continue to plan on doing. And so that was the call. I think it's really interesting. You can go and listen to it. It's just on their website. But I mean, those growth numbers are just really crazy. And as I listened to the analysts call in, and I thought so much about how much of what they were doing is really all related to COVID, I thought, since they're positioned globally, I was like, and that the share price was down so much, I just thought, wow, I think so I doubled my position in it basically, and we'll see how that plays out. You do see Reuters has only a price target of $169, so it's already at 203 after a $80 drop. So it was like 285, 280, 282. And then the news came out. So I haven't seen any reason why, and I can only guess it was just the Pfizer announcement. And I don't see how the Biden-Trump presidency thing affected it negatively. So, anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Thanks so much.